it, I will know immediately that this person is not fit for his position.
Mhm.
So of course the great day came, you know, the emperor's birthday, and he was going to have a grand entry, a parade, wearing his new robes, and of course everything had been made for him from this magical thread, you know, that did not exist. And right down, right down the hat, the necktie, the crown, the shoes, the underwear, you know. So he's walking down the street. He thinks he's wearing this marvelous suit of clothing on this nice, brisk, cool day, and he's not. And everyone's looking, and everyone has been told, oh, you know, this is the special fabric that if you cannot see it, it means you're not worthy of your position.
Yeah.
And you know, the emperor couldn't see it, but the emperor had kept quiet, and everyone kept quiet, and no one wanted to say who wants it to be known that he's not worthy or she's not worthy of his or her position. And finally, a little boy says, Mommy, Daddy, look, the emperor, he has no clothes on. Now, I would believe that little boy was probably neurodivergent, and he was probably not seeing what he was told to see, that all the typical people
like it was not present there. How can you say that it is present there, you know?
Now in the story, what happened, of course, was a happy ending, that finally, one by one, other people got brave and they spoke up, and finally, they spoke up and laughed, and finally these two thieves, who'd been paid money to do nothing, were kicked out of the kingdom, and finally the emperor got a proper suit of clothing. But I think what really happened is not so optimistic. I would say what probably happened, if the people in that kingdom were anything like most of the people out there today, well, probably they took that little boy and they probably came to him and said, darling, something's wrong with you. Something's very, very wrong with you.
He never know what happened in the story afterward with that
perceptual disability, little boy.
Yeah.
They must have said, I think they would have said, you have a perceptual disability and we are going to find you a special therapist or a special pair of glasses, and you are going to work very hard at seeing the clothing just as we all see it ourselves, and we will not let you go until your perceptions are indistinguishable from those of your peers and all around you. And I think if the story is really the way this happens, they might have won. That little boy might have grown up convinced that either if he couldn't see what was not there to be seen, that something was wrong in his eyes or his brain or something, or maybe he got brainwashed to see it after all, and he grew up, and he might have had another little boy, and he might have told that little boy, you too must see what everyone sees.
Yeah.
And I think that probably is what really happened, if this story ever happened at all.
Yeah, so I think I have taken a lot of your time. It's almost 2 hours above that.
Yeah. Well, you can break it up.
Going on.
I hope that this was productive and enlightening for you all.
I think it is, because if I talk about my own writing, it's very bad. I would say that it's the worst handwriting. But I speak very fast too, and I will
do something.
I think fast and I write very fast. This is what my thing
is. We can do. I definitely can work with improving the legibility of fast writing. Let us take a few minutes. If you will write something, and it could be anything you write, but I will suggest a sentence to write that I suggest, because this sentence has all the lowercase letters of the alphabet, so it gives me a good sample. This sentence that I would wish you to write is, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
Can you give me a minute? I should bring my
with pleasure, I will do this, okay? With pleasure, I will do this. A sentence, and I don't want you to see it in my handwriting, because that, of course, would influence your own. I wish to see your untouched handwriting, so I will dictate that sentence as often as is needful. It should not be too hard. I try, it's a very common sentence for handwriting practice or keyboarding practice.
What do you want me to write?
In the USA, I will say it a few words at a time, and I'll repeat it as much as you. The quick brown fox, F-O-X, jumps over the lazy dog. Okay, and let's say, hey Siri, open notes. I want to get open the page of my notes
You
because
cannot
I
imagine
have,
how my writing is.
and I don't worry. And if I now I'm trying to see this large, I cannot quite, very, now your writing is in fact, okay, you put dogs instead of dogs, but not a problem. It's good, good. As long you have jump instead of jumps, but you have an S on the end. It's so good. You have all the letters. So I'm going to go bit by bit. And in fact, this is what I do in a handwriting column that I write in an international magazine for pen collectors called Foolish Magazine. It really is called. Now I'm trying to enlarge for you what it is. Here is how I would say you can speed up your writing by simply, when you write a capital T or even a lowercase t, if the next letter is H, you may wish to have a join there as if it is in fact one letter, because this is often quite convenient. And there it can save you that little sentence. Now, the letter E is, even though E is a simple letter, it is a difficult letter to form neatly. There are a couple of tricks for forming it neatly, but one of the simplest tricks is simply not to join a previous letter into E.
Okay.
In other words, let your hand come off the paper, because that way you'll have a little more control over the E.
Small actually. Sometimes I feel that my thoughts are going very fast and I'm not able to catch up because I talk very fast too. So I write very fast.
It's understood, and that is true. A fast talker will tend to be a fast writer and a fast thinker. And many illegible writers are simply fast talkers, fast thinkers. They're hurrying. But I'm going to give you one tip for all of your writing before I go on to any particulars of further correction, which is this. As you write, every time you are writing an alphabet letter and you begin to move to the next letter, whether you're moving in with your pen in the air or your pen on the paper, ask yourself for one split second, is the letter that I have just formed good, quite perfectly clear, perfectly legible, and also well formed? If you can honestly answer yes, allow yourself or challenge yourself to make the next letter even faster. But if you must honestly answer no, if you say, oh, the T is good, the H is good, but the E is bad, challenge yourself or require yourself to make the next letter a little more slowly. And in this way, over time, you will teach yourself to self-monitor and balance your speed and your legibility. It's really just like playing music or learning a sport, which are also motor activities. If you play any musical instrument, or if you're learning to dance or learning a sport or anything, when you come upon a series of difficult movements, a difficult phrase in the musical piece you were learning, for instance, you know that to practice, you will have to slow down just a little until you get used to it. And if you practice when you are doing a letter, alphabet letter, stroke, whatever, if it comes out well, make yourself form the next letter a very, very tiniest bit faster. If it comes out not so good, if you say, oh, this E is too open, or the top of the T isn't touching the rest of the letter, when you see a flaw, or this could be misread as another letter, that is your signal to go a little slower. If I had to give just one tip, I'd give that. Now, if you put your writing on the screen again and hold it up, it is a little difficult to now. Quick. I would say now quick is not, I would say your U is not bad. I would say you have perhaps a little too much space between the I and the C where you left the pen. A rule that I would recommend for letters is that, unlike people in these times, letters within words should not do social distancing. The words should do social distancing, leave a space between words. But
by the way, my writing is too much constricted. You need to pay extra attention to look toward my.
Well, constricted is not so bad. I would say that a lot of the best writers are a bit narrow. They can get more on the page and it makes them a little faster. You don't want too much, but your writing is not too constricted. In fact, sometimes within words, you are sometimes, as when you pick up the pen, having too much space. When you must pick up the pen, make sure that the next letter is close together. Remember, letters do not get coronavirus and they do not need to worry about social distancing. They can be close together. Think of a group of letters in a word as being like a group of houses on a street in a village. They can be close together. Or think of a group of friends when you're getting ready to go into the cinema and you stand with your friends. We don't want to be crowded, but you don't want to be too far apart. Has the Zoom ended?
I'm back.
Are you still?
Yes, I'm about to bring my stuff. See?
Yeah. This, I would say, you could do here. Now, here's what I would like you to do. And there's a lot that we could do here. I would say that wherever you get a feeling of losing control as you're writing and joining, you know how sometimes we join two letters together and some joins are easy, A to N, O to I, maybe it's easy, but you know, G to H, P to Q, P to A, something like that, not so easy, right? Q to U, not so easy.
Yeah.
When you get that feeling that a join is going to be difficult, and it feels very much like you losing the transmission in the car when you drive and the transmission gets weak and you cannot control, we all know that feeling. I know it and I don't drive, but I've watched people who drive. That is your signal that the join there should be made in the air, because then any error will have in the air. And I will show you, I will write one of my favorite examples to use. I will simply write the word papa, okay? P-A-P-A, okay? Okay, and I'm going to write this word, okay, P-A-P-A. And let's go, okay. Okay, we have here, papa. Now, you know, the A and the P I joined, but the P to the A, I did not join. Why? Very simple. A to P is a very simple straight line. We know from math class, geometry, the shortest distance between points is a straight line. Okay, and we have AP. And if it had been OP, if the word had been, for instance, the word popular, again, and and it will be a straight line, and I'm simply drawing little arrows here, straight line. But if we have P into A, well, we cannot do this without a quite difficult series of curves. Either that, or we would have to slice through the letter, which would be a legibility issue in itself, you know? What do we have to have for PA? We have, if we want to do it properly, we have to go out and up and back and left. And you remember all this kind of thing from, right? We all had to sit and suffer with over and under and back and that actually takes longer than just letting the pen go in the air from the bottom of the P to the top of the A. So when you have a compound curve join, a multiply curve join, not just something quick like A to P, A to I, O to, not just something quick, but something that risks a lot of illegibility because the curves are difficult at speed. And for those who have hand difficulties, coordination difficulties, they're difficult.
Like, impulsive.
Yeah, well, I'd say you don't want to be too impulsive. There's a place and time for an impulse. Now, what happens if we are impulsive in handwriting? I'm drawing some samples of what happens, and these might be taken for impulse, but I will show you after I do some difficult, improper samples of what happens if we try to join. Is my pen still writing? Good. What happens if we try to join beyond our ability? Why, what happens, we have here, what? We have on this first one, we see what happens. This is, right? What do we have here? We have this is not really, we have better yet here, okay?
That's
we have, look, you see, I'm trying to show you this one, right? We have P and we see it is incorrectly formed. Then we have even slicing through the letter, and even the letters opening up, tearing themselves apart. Now, we will see this in anyone's handwriting if they are hurrying, if you have an examination and you've only just started question 3 and you have 5 more minutes. Well, we all know what happens to your handwriting, even if you are quite good as a handwriter. Beyond a certain speed, you collapse. But we also know that what happens to all of us at some speeds is what happens to some of us, those with, below average, aptitudes in terms of motor coordination. To some of us, this will happen at all times. And I say below average, but there's nothing wrong with that. Mathematically, half of us are below the average, right? So, in fact, there have been, in fact, ever since World War II, there has been research on brain injuries. Initially, research on injuries caused by lesions in wartime, on, people had bullet wounds to the head or something. And a lot of this research was done during World War II, often in Russia. And more recently, of course, research done on, individuals who have strokes or who simply have difficulties. And one of the first things that was found was that these curved strokes out of a curved letter into a curved letter, those are the first things to fall apart, not only in an ordinary writer who is facing great speed. Either he leaves them out or she leaves them out, or if attempting them, they become distorted. But this is what happens for all of us, even for those master penmen of 1900. Remember, I pointed out to you that so many of the instances where this wonderful penman who thought he was connecting all the letters really wasn't, and 4 out of 5 of them were to avoid what would have been a curved stroke, a loop, or something like coming into A or coming out of, G or P or something. Now, if a master penmanship expert in 1900, couldn't join all his letters, why should we think we have to? We have a warrant, I think, to allow ourselves to make the straight letter join. So one of my big rules for you is, when in doubt, leave that join out. I'm not saying don't join anything, don't join everything, but I'm saying that you can watch this for yourself. In fact, one of the best exercises you can give yourself is something that's rather fun, because you can do it even while you're watching television or listening to the radio or music. Simply sit down with a pad of squared paper, graph paper as we call it in the USA, and a pen of a size that you can write a couple of letters comfortably in each square, lowercase letters like and A, and I would say mark out on that squared paper a big square of 26 small squares. And in the first row, I want you to write every combination of A with another letter, A-N, A-B, A-C, all the way to A-Z. As you write, see for yourself which combinations feel easy to join and remain legible when joined, and join those, and the others do not. And, and then the same night or the next night, if you don't have much time, as you said, when you watch your TV or you listen to your music or a movie or something, do BA through BZ. You'll find that some of the letters, some of the A's join the next letter, but you'll find BA to BZ, nothing really joins, probably. CA to CZ, you'll probably find a pattern similar to A. C into A probably won't join, C into B might very well join, C into Z certainly won't, it will just be a mess. And you go through the alphabet in this way, a line or 2 or 3 every day, while you're, relaxing. Now, by the time you get to the E's and the F's, and remember, this is all to be lowercase, and you should fit 2 letters in each box so that, you are keeping track of your joining, and being compressed is not a problem. Being compressed to a degree will help you. By the time you get to the E and the F, you'll probably realize what is your pattern of joining, and you'll start to have a reflex that helps you join where it works for you and not join where it doesn't, which will come in handy because, out of G, you probably will not be joining anything. Out of H, you might. Out of I, you might, but I would say you might want to recommend to yourself that out of I, out of J, pick up the pen so you can dot it before you go on. That's another little time waster. When we write and we wait to the end of the word to go back and finish the T, it might be not so hard for a word like, to or something. But what if it's Tyrannosaurus or thankfulness or, thyroidectomy or something? You're going all the way back and, you're wasting so much time. And you will find for yourself where joining is faster and where not joining is faster. And there are some commonalities for most of us. But for most of us, for instance, we'll find that most of us can join more often out of the letter O or T than out of the letter A or U. You'll find some combinations where it just doesn't work. And one thing you can do if you like art or you want something a little fun is when you have this squared paper and you've sat down for a few days or perhaps a couple of weeks and you have all your neat little square AA through AZ, BA through ZZ, all the way. It's almost like a little bit of needlework. And you might want to make it colorful. Many of my students, they like to take all the joins that worked well for them. Let's say in my case, O into I works quite well, for instance, or A into I, but and all the ones that were well, take a green highlighter, green for go. You can go ahead and color those in. Then for all the joins that really do not work, take a red highlighter or pink if you don't have red, red for suck. Color those in. Stop joining those. And for those that are where you might sometimes do it, you might sometimes if you're fast, or sometimes you're not quite sure. Well, you can leave this blank, or if you wish, you can color them yellow, as in yellow for proceed with caution. You will normally get an interesting little pattern, and you will have documented for yourself what joins you can really go ahead and do, what joins you should stop doing, and for which joins you should proceed with caution. For instance, in my case, A into A is definitely red. Stop doing that. A into B, I would say, yeah, proceed with caution. A into I, though, works marvelously well. And you can see this for yourself, and your results will be different from mine. A little different, probably. Everyone's results will be a little different, but we'll see some commonalities. I like to say when it comes to handwriting, one of the reasons everybody is different is that every body is different.
Yeah.
And of course, remember, our brains are parts of our bodies, but certainly our hand proportions are different. I have sometimes, for instance, seen people with unusually shortened thumbs, either by birth or because of some injury, and they could not hold a pen in the typical way. They had to hold it between their finger, index, and this works for a lot of people. I've known people that it worked for, and it in fact can be seen in some pictures of the people in history. Albert Schweitzer had a hand injury of some sort, and he is often seen holding his pen like this. Or even the French artist, very well known French artist of the 19th century, Eugène Delacroix. Yeah, and that can work. It's not so good.
I mean, it's very difficult.
That's not great. Yeah. I would say when I see such a position, if I see this pinching grip, I say, try to straighten out your hand. Let that index finger say hello to the pen. Let them dance the tango together. Let the pen support that finger. And often when we do it, we are doing this because we're trying to get control. We're really concentrating, but you'll have more control if you let more of the pen, more of the finger touch the pen. You'll have more control in the long run. It's very much the same as, well, we've all seen those people who sit on beds of sharpened nails. They sit or they lie down on these, instead of a mattress, they've got all these nails, and we wonder how they do it. Well, how they do it, I'm told by people who research this, is that, well, if you cannot stand on it because it would be too many kilograms per square centimeter, or we in the USA we talk pounds per square, and it would pierce the skin. But if you're lying down, you have some thin man, and he weighs, perhaps 50 kilograms, and he's lying on these nails that are perhaps 2 centimeters apart. And even if they're quite far apart, even though you think it's a lot, if you think of what portion of his body is over what number of nails, you see that, it's very light pressure. He might tell you, oh, this is the power of my mind, the power of prayer. Well, not necessarily so, because if you have the sharpened nails that close together, you can fill an ordinary rubber balloon with water. and put it on those nails. And the balloon will normally not be pierced, even though the balloon is not possessed of any particular meditative superpowers. That's much the same thing. The more support you have, the less pressure you will need.
Okay, I have one question in my mind because
Yeah.
like you said that uh, when you were a child by yourself, it was very difficult for you to write. You know, uh, we have a lot of autistic children, ADHD or disability children who cannot write, who cannot hold the pen. So how they can start? But by writing, because
there are many ways, and to some extent it will be different from child to child.
yeah.
Often, a very non-threatening way is to have them write in the air with their hand, and not just one finger because the motor control is wrong, but with a whole hand or a closed fist, and then work down to two fingers. Sometimes I have them begin as what I call the human pencil. Put your hands together, the human pen or human pencil in your two hands, and you can write big letters, A, B. Sometimes you can tell them a story. For instance, if I am sitting opposite the child, I sit opposite you, of course, I will have to reverse to demonstrate. Fortunately, as a dyslexic, I'm very, very good at mirror writing backwards. So if I am saying, okay, you can follow me along, and we're going to do A. So I'm going to say, we're going to start high up. Here is A. It's an airplane flying all the way out. Now it's going down. It's landing. Now pitch up again. Whoa. And then down. If they have a toy they like, it could be a toy airplane or a favorite toy doll, or even something they just like to play with, have them do it, perhaps even something that they don't even think of as food at all, as writing at all, because they may be scared. Sometimes by the time we learn to write, we're a little scared. We cannot do it because we've had difficulty. Have them hold a favorite food, such as a carrot or a banana, if they, and write that on the air. And then, okay, you've done it on the air. Next step. And you can still have two hands up at the moment. You may not yet know who's dominant, so there's just a gesture, and you can have them do motions similar to dancing. A, B, C, or, whatever it would be in order, Ali, Ba, whatever, Da, you can have them whatever works. And, you will be the expert on that. By the way, that is as far as I ever got with the Arabic alphabet, okay? I figured
wherever they go, they start, the child is not able to write ABC,
but you can start,
write Arabic or write later on.
If you can start with emotion, and you don't have to start with A. If you want to start with lines, watch this. If I go with my hands and I'm being my human pencil or human pen down, what can you make out of this? It could be I, it could be L. You can, once they do a rhythm, and we like rhythm, most of us, they can say, oh, let's separate it apart. If we're doing English, obviously go left to right. I'm going to demonstrate in reverse so that we do it as a child would say it. If you're doing Urdu, go, right, left. If we're doing English, we could decide that this first stroke is the foundation for, lowercase L or lowercase I. Do this. Or put two of them together, you have U. Make a larger one, you have a taller U. You can form letters out of another. For instance, if we have U, we know that this is U. Down, down. And make little sound effects as you do it, get most of the
sound.
Well. That. Now watch this. If I have U, do you realize every time I practice a lowercase U, I have really made the final 2/3 of a lowercase a? We're going to start a lowercase u, but we're going to start different place. Going to start over here. And now we're going to go airplane. Now we go on and make the U. And there's our A. And you can check if it's a good A, it will have a good U in it. And of course, for Urdu, it will be somewhat different rhythms. You could take this, and you have alif. And then obviously for Urdu, we have things we don't have in English. You have ba, we have that. You would have that particular curve we don't have in the Roman alphabet. But of course, you can work that out. And of course, what can be very interesting is, of course, let them color it and let them make patterns, and say the sound if they're going like, ba, 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 or in English,
Ka,
b,
ka, ka,
b.
da, da. Yeah, we have those sounds.
If you want to go, in Devanagari, of course, you're going to have ga, ka, ka, ka. Okay. You can even do, yeah. So of course, and so you have that practice vertical, and at a certain point, you can transition to where you have, okay, even if they're not ready for pencil and paper, this is what I sometimes have people do. If you have a refrigerator with nice clear space, do you know those dry erase markers we write on and wipe off? You've seen those, right?
Yeah.
You realize that often you can write on a refrigerator with them and wipe it off. If you cannot do it on your refrigerator because it's wood or something, you can put up a plastic sheet like those white plastic shopping bags. You open them and you have already something, and you can be very big once you have it, and you want to start vertically because that will be a good cue as to directionality, top down. Very often, especially those of us who are on the spectrum, we take words literally. We get confused. If you are trying to write and you are starting on a horizontal surface, and someone says, like, let's say this is your table, and the teacher says, okay, we start this letter, we start the top. Well, you know what I said, or mentions, I never, this is all the top. Where do I start? I can start anybody. It's not true. But if you tell them, if this is, start the top, then so all of a sudden, top, top, top. And then you can take that surface and you can gradually make it slanted and less slanted. Clipboards are good for this. Easels, even the loose leaf notebooks, the binders, that are that wedge shape, are very good for this.
Let me make it clear. It's my clipboard and I need to write it like that.
Yes.
Like that, and then on table.
Yes, but you can also go in an intermediate, work down to it gradually, because if they know, you don't have to go like from this to this. Go from slanted gradually. Put a support. You're going straight up, 80 degrees, 70 degrees. And in this way, you can work them down. Because this way, if we're working on, let's say letter L starts at the top, whatever we're working on, if we already know, okay, top, then this is the top. And by the time they get down to the bottom, then they'll know. And this is very important. I like to say a letter is not only a shape, it is a pathway. In other words, if you do it in the wrong way, it's not really the letter.
If a child start writing, so he needs to write like this way also, not this way.
I would say, yeah, of course, and then of course you get to the, well, if you're talking about how the paper is oriented, some of us, for reasons of hand position, will have to go and turn the paper.
What I mean, for example, A, B, C.
Yeah.
First child.
Well, you can do it. I will tell you, some of the best of my left-handed students have actually done this. In fact, I've even known left-handed calligraphers of all people to do it. Obviously, one must compensate, but I've had people, for instance, position the paper so that, well, let us say that this was the writing, and most of us do it like this. Some of the left-handed folks, especially some with the hooked hand, some with the not, will actually have to go, a lot of the hooked-handed ones will have to go top down. Okay. But they can do, they simply mentally rotate, and dyslexics are very good at mental rotation.
They do that.
Yeah. And some of the lefties with the conventional hold will have to go bottom up. It can be done. Now, if you think that it cannot be done to rotate things in your mind, think of the situations that we have sometimes seen in village schools, where we have where there was not so much now, but at one point where there would be one book and everyone stands around the table, this one here, this one here, this one here, and they still learn to read and even to write, even if it was sideways. Now, we do not see this that much in America these days, but sometimes we see it. In fact, I will tell you a story about a man who is probably, although he is not from your part of the world, he's very famous in your part of the world. You probably know about Horatio Babington Macaulay, the great historian, right? And everyone I know learns about him if they learn, British history, and if they learn European history. He wrote about the decline, fall of the Roman Empire. When he was a little boy, and he was a very bright but very unusual little boy. I think he might have been somewhere on the spectrum. He taught himself to read. In what way? When his father, every night his father would get the family around him and would read to them from the Bible as the last thing at night after dinner, before everyone went to bed, after supper. And because, Macaulay was a little boy, he typically he liked to stand opposite his father, and his father would be reading. So here's the father, and here is, the book, and here is, little Horatio. So he learned to read, he taught himself to read at 3 by listening to his father read from the Bible while pointing out the words, and God said to, whatever. He learned to read beautifully, but he learned it all upside down. For years. That was how he read. I don't know if that was how he wrote, but the point is he corrected it. Think of everyone who has ever worked with a printing press.
This activity by itself, if I'm not wrong, because brain is going to do this activity. Like I asked somebody that we have different languages and how we are going to teach those children languages. Then there was a discussion about those speech therapists that first a child need to learn sound, then he's going to identify sound with language. That this is a brain activity, because brain have to do its work too. Like all the time you're teaching your child, it's hour of training and training and training, and the child is so sad. And you say child is not doing anything because you're making your child exhausted of all the physical effort. That is happening with children.
Yes, and if you can combine learning sounds with something else, in other words, if you can say the sound as you're doing a motion, if you're working A, and you want to teach, if you're learning English, you have to learn that A in different situations can stand for different sounds. But if you're working on something like cat, you can have and have them write. And later on, when they're learning some more words, have them do it different. You can explain, yes, you have this sound and sometimes you have this. And that is more matter for the reading teacher. And I can probably refer you to some excellent teachers of reading. If you want to do a podcast with them, let me know. Send me a message if you would like.
And I have one important question. Sorry, I'm cutting because our time is going.
I've been up a longer time than this.
If we talk about capital letters, and
yes,
child are having confusion in that. At the end, I would like to talk about a little bit about that.
Very important topic. Now, and of course, first off, of course, that is like many things. That's a difficulty that you are spared in Urdu and Devanagari, but of course is a major difficulty in English. Now, as you know, there are two schools of thought about how one begins. Should one begin with capital letters because you can write everything with the capitals, or should one begin with lowercase letters because that's 98% of what we write?
Yeah.
Now, I believe there are good arguments.
Small letters.
Yeah, you were saying?
In books, small letters. You don't have capital letters.
Now, I believe that there are good arguments to be made either way. It can be successfully done either way. It is perhaps more difficult to do it with capital letters and do it well for several reasons. One, capital letters, since they are more different from one another than lowercase letters are, the capital letters do not fit as easily into groups of similar shape. In other words, if you know how to do a letter U, lowercase u, you can do a lowercase a. If you know how to do a lowercase a, you can do a lowercase q. If you know how to do a lowercase q, you can do a lowercase g. But for the capital letters, well, we get much less practice on them. They're more different. A, C, D, T, Q, those all look more different than from one another than their lowercase counterparts. Number two, if you begin by writing only capitals, that first impressions cut the deepest. If your first notion of writing is that it's got to be in all capitals, you may very well end up being one of the people who, when they write, are putting in capitals where they do not belong, or even writing everything in capitals just because you don't know. And, oh, they told me capitals and now it's this whole different thing. Oh, no, I'm confused. And this is especially the case if we're talking about those who learn English as a second language and their first written language may have been something like Urdu or, Hindi, where there was not such a distinction. And I actually have worked many times with this. I mentioned having worked with the doctors. At one hospital I worked with, one of the first hospitals I worked with, it was in a town in California that has a large community of people who came to the USA from Saudi Arabia. And many of the doctors were of this community. And when they had learned English in school, they learned beautiful English, but not much time was spent on handwriting. And they'd all really learned capitals and they could read lowercase, but we had, big grown men and women, writing all capitals. So what I say is I recommend starting with lowercase, but if you don't want to, you can start with capitals quite easily. So first I'll tell you what I do immediately for someone who comes to me and he's writing all capitals. If someone is writing all capitals, and let's say he's writing your name and he has the last letter as well as the first letter is in A. Well, first I say, I'm going to show you how to reconstruct this A so that we are going to take this A and turn it into a version of A that is a rather older version in terms of the stroke order, the order of the strokes, and is the version that actually created our lowercase. Now, we're all used to doing a printed capital A. We do what? Left side, right side, middle. Now, when it was invented, in the earliest versions of A, the Romans, the Greeks, and even earlier civilizations, they actually did it in a much more sensible way. They went left. They went what? Left, middle, right. And if you do it, you see such a rhythm, left, middle, right.
Yeah.
Now, if you do it left, middle, right, you will see for yourself, I'm just using A as an example because it's the first letter also in your name. If you do it, you will see those A's that I showed before. Now, this pen, if you will forgive me, this pen is finally running out of ink. So I'm going to have to see where did I put my ballpoint that I was using earlier. In other words, if you go left, middle, right, you will see the lowercase a evolve. So I have them do that, which is, by the way, what I will do for a child if the child has learned uppercase only and is now to learn lowercase. Once I do that, I then say, okay, once you can do this, so we're going to have and I'm going to go back to my little sketch where I did the A before. And now you'll see it works left, middle, right, left, middle, right, left, middle, right. I'm writing some examples and if you do this, left, middle, right becomes, if you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I actually draw the history, and I will tell them, this was 2,000 years ago, and this was 1,500 years ago, and this was 1,000, and so on. And as they do it, I say, now, of course, we want to be much more structured. So I say, but I'll tell you a secret, sir or madam. Even before you learn how to do the lowercase properly, even while you were still doing these motor exercises that recapitulate our history of our letters, you can begin to learn how lowercase functions by simply do this. When you're writing in all capitals, instead of writing all the capitals the same size, if they are old enough that they've learned about lowercase and they know it exists, I say, take the ones that should be lowercase and make them shorter because you know that they should be the lowercase. And just to give you an example, you could try this with your own name. I will show you an example that I use because I have a tip on here on my super stylish Scriptic-tastic pen just for those who write in all capitals. If you write in all capitals, I have illustrated here with the word New York. You see?
Yeah, exactly.
Write New York in all big capitals. Take the ones that should be lowercase and make them smaller and make them faster. Because making capitals smaller and faster is historically how our lowercase originated. People needed something that was faster than the original capital. So, for instance,
let me tell you something because I am working with autistic and children who have disability, how to write. So when we start, I don't know you can see this or not. This is line.
Yes.
Line, then this line, then this line. Because this is how they can do that. Then that is letter A. If a child will learn letter A, then the child will learn
Yes.
triangle.
I
That's
see
how we
what you're
do.
doing.
That's
Yes.
how we do from
Yeah.
the capital
And
letter.
I say, yeah. So you are having this, yeah. And I would say certainly we need to have horizontals, verticals, diagonals, but keep in mind we need not only to assemble them if we are to write.
Patterns. We work on
Yeah.
patterns too.
But yeah, we not only to assemble them, but also to have the movement between them, even in the air. For instance, if you have to take a very simple example, you know, let's take the letter K, just because this is my name. We could think straight, diagonal, diagonal, you know, but what if you tell yourself that it's also a pathway? You're going down and up and back down, down and up and back down. If you have the flow of it, you will not only be able to write a capital K and write a smaller K, you know, but you will be able to see even how some of the other forms of K originated. In other words, so you definitely want to have the pieces on paper, but don't treat it all as static. Have a motion, and you can build that motion into the shapes, into the recognition, see how the loops happen. We don't have to write the loops, but we have to read them. You know, even though I like a very plain and simple handwriting, I am not under the illusion that the rest of the world is going to wake up one day and write exactly the way I tell them to. You know,
The thing is that
there's going to
a lot
be
of
your
people
doctor,
who struggle to write.
your college professor.
There are a lot of people who
I beg your
struggle
pardon?
to write. There are a lot of people who don't even know how to hold a pencil, who struggle to write. So these discussions
Yeah.
are important for
While
them.
you work with it, it's like anything else, you learn how to do it. I mean, I will tell you, and I see expensive, you know, fee paying schools, and you know, the top people send their children there, and the person at the school will go there and they will pay, you know, thousands of dollars to teach the children at that school how to hold a tennis racket, and they won't pay 5 cents to teach the person how to hold a pen.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you know, which one will he use much more often?
Yeah.
You know, if he doesn't go into the Olympics or something, for most of us, it will be the pen. And
But you know,
there have unfortunately been people I couldn't work with.
You can
And
do
there have been
that.
people I couldn't work with because someone said, "Oh, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it my way." Some things you can do your way, some things not. And it's simply a matter of if you can demonstrate hold. I'm not saying there's one true right and only way forever to hold a pen. I'm saying that there are a million ways you can hold a pen, and maybe 5 or 10 of them work. So many don't work. You can have some variation, but it is not infinite. You know, fortunately, we live in a world where even in handwriting, there is more than one way to be right. But there's still a lot of ways to be wrong. You know, if I write my L and I start at the bottom right hand corner and go up, you know, that's way out. And when I tell the students, and we call on those students to say, "Oh, I insist on doing it from the bottom up, backwards, something," I tell them, and they say, "Oh, it looks all right." When this time I say, "It might look all right, but it won't move all right." And I tell them, if we think of planting flowers in our garden, we can have a real flower and plant it and it grows. Or we could go and buy an artificial flower and stick it in. You stick it in the soil, and that might look like a real flower, but it is not. You know, it might look very pretty. In fact, in my yard out front, I actually have one artificial plant because the person who was doing the gardening found one he thought looked nice, and it wouldn't die in the winter. We have very cold winters here, you know. We have a very cold climate here. In fact, I think yesterday it was something like minus 10 degrees Celsius at night. So it was cold. You know, let's just say this. I don't want to tell you what it is in Fahrenheit, but but I figured out, so you can see how cold it can get here. Okay, I have got a bit of a low battery issue, so that's why I lost this. So I just, I wasn't anticipating to be here. I wasn't expecting to be here so long, but but as we talk, since I have a bit of a little warning that the battery is low, as I talk, I'm going to be fidgeting, looking for something to plug in with, I've got a cable with me. Finding a wire is a whole other bit of a problem, but I'm sure I've got one. Anyway, I like to point out, if you have an artificial flower, the parts could have been put together in any way, and it will look pretty, but it won't grow. It won't give you another flower when it won't set a seed. And if we want something that's real and moves from one to the other,
which makes sense actually. The thing that makes sense actually, because it is going to be neural wiring in your brain. It's very important to teach your child how to form a letter properly. That's why, and reading and writings are the very important tool for
now, for some things there might be a little bit of a variation, but not a lot. For some letters you can have more than one way to do them, but there will be a certain commonality. Nothing's going to start at the bottom right hand corner and go clockwise. Nothing is going. And there are certain things where you can have a few little variations, even, particularly in some of the capitals as we use them less. But I would say, I'm looking, as you know, I'm just looking for something where I hope, plug this in before everything just dies on me.
Already recorded for so long, it's almost three hours for our discussion.
I'm just looking for, I had some place to plug it in, but then I saw this wasn't working, that wasn't working.
Wrap up this discussion and we will have another discussion. Well,
anyway, we could talk again at another time. If you would wish, I don't know, some lessons or whatever. I will tell you, after we meet, after you and I finish here, since we met on Twitter, what I will do is, after this, I will go into Twitter at some time, today or tomorrow. I have a list that I say of recommended sites that are free or have inexpensive resources along with the expensive ones. They are about perhaps my 5 or 6 favorite sites for those who wish to teach themselves. There are many more I could give, but I kept the list to a few short favorites. And if you look at those, you will have a very good basis for teaching yourself, even if you never work with me and even if we never meet again. So you should, I say, feel free to circulate this. And there's simply a list of writing resources. There's nothing about, reading cursive. In fact, and these are from a variety of sources. In fact, believe it or not, the first one on my list is, believe it or not, a full-page article in the New York Times that was written by 2 of my colleagues, where they wrote an op-ed to the New York Times, and what they submitted was nothing more or less than a 1-page, gigantic, the Times page is gigantic, 1-page teach yourself copybook with illustrations that they drew by hand, every letter and parts of letters. You could sit down with that sheet, even if you had some difficulties, and never talk to me, I think, and come up with a quite decent handwriting. Maybe not 100% wonderful, but definitely you would be able to progress further from that starting point on your own. And, the New York Times, of all people, printed this. They're not an education paper. Certainly they have articles in education, but it's practically unheard of that an op-ed would be not about something like capital punishment or politics or viruses or water shortage, but that it would be, let's teach people how to write.
And that is
now not enough people listen.
Important to understand that.
What?
It is very important to understand that writing is very important skill. Reading and writing are 2 survival skills for teacher for children and adults who have neurodiversity. So even if the children have other skill and they want to learn music, it's okay with that, but do not deprive
Yeah,
your child of
remember, you can use music or anything else almost to teach writing, to
exactly.
teach reading. In other words, when one learns music, one can learn, just as you learn sounds and to associate with them with notes, you can say, all right, these sounds also come in the words of the songs we're learning to sing. Sounds, some of the names of notes are also some of the names of letters. And in fact, I will tell a very inspiring story that I read I read in the paper. This was about the time that the COVID virus began to be known. Since there were people in India who were being, sent to places of safety to be kept away from the virus so they would not transmit. And they had all these persons in India, many of whom had not had much education, did not read or write. Well, as you know, I don't know if it's so in Pakistan, but as you know, one of the most popular amusements in India is that they get together and there's a game. I forget what it's called, but they sing the first line of songs from a
Tashkari, it's called
movie,
in Tashkari.
and yeah, and someone has to sing the next line. And what they did in some of these, isolation camps was they would get the people together to play this singing game,
Yeah, they do
and
that.
then teach them to write the words that they were singing, if it was whatever it was. And I don't know any Indian movies, but if we were to use a movie from America, like a Disney movie, in other words, if they had let it go, teach them to write that and sing it and write as you're singing and reading.
Yeah, we are supposed
And
to that.
they actually had people go home who had never been able to go to school their whole lives and never had a chance.
Because there's a
And
lot
they
of
came
poverty over
home.
there. The poor
They went
country.
home. So I mean, at least they got something out of this whole COVID thing. I'd say if you're going to if you're going to have to be someplace you didn't want to be, well, at least they got something out of it. I only hope that if I am ever sent someplace to isolation because of some kind of disease, I only hope they can find something wonderful to teach me.
Yeah. So
Maybe calculus. I was not too good at math at school. Maybe they can teach me more math.
maybe
Anyway,
that
yes,
that visual math. Maybe they can teach you visual math, how to do that.
yes, I have definitely done things with visual math, and we can definitely talk about that.
We
Now,
will talk about,
now
actually, our
here
time is
in
already,
the UK,
we have
yeah,
already gone so many, and I have to cut all the discussions because nobody would be able to see that much
indeed.
long
Now,
discussion.
here in the USA, in my part of the USA, it is now 2:04 a.m. I am on the eastern coast of the USA, and we have more than one time zone in the USA, and here it is 2:04 a.m.
It is
For,
over, it is 12
yeah,
right now.
for
But
many, yeah,
we
for
have recorded for 3 hours actually, and I have to cut it down.
well, it felt like 30 minutes. I was so surprised I saw the time. Well, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
I hope that our audiences will have as much fun as you and I have been having. There was so much to cover. Even 3 hours, we could not do it.
We will
Now,
do
I
again, and we will
you
talk about
if
the
you
visual
want me
math
to
you're
give a
talking about,
course, now
because
I am more than willing to give a course.
yeah.
And
Okay.
I have had to do many things besides handwriting. I will tell you the last thing I'll tell you, in fact, that one of the most unusual instances for me of teaching handwriting, well, this happened shortly after I had moved to Albany, New York. I got a call from a graduate student at New York University in New York City, and it's one of the top universities in the country. And like many other people, he wanted handwriting help. And since he was in New York, couldn't take off much time for his studies. He was in New York City, and I grew up there, so I'm familiar with it. I went there, and we met in a lounge area near the student library, and he and I worked together. And he and I had scheduled a 1-day crash course. In other words, a cram course that I would come to him, be there for 3 hours, and do everything. Now, he did so well, in fact, that in 2 hours we were finished. He was very good. And he said to me, well, we finished everything in 2 hours by your own admission. Leadership and